My family told everyone I was a failure. I sat quietly at my sister's promotion ceremony until her base commander looked at me and whispered, "Wait, you're..." The whole room went silent. Even my dad was speechless. For years, my own family told everyone I was a military washout, a failure, while I secretly soared to heights they couldn't even imagine. Then, at my younger sister's promotion ceremony, one unexpected voice shattered their narrative, forcing a reckoning I never thought would come. You see, I'm Jessica Bennett, 34, and I was sitting there, quiet, watching my younger sister Stephanie get promoted in the Air Force. I'd specifically chosen civilian clothes that day, a simple blue dress, not my uniform. My family, for as long as I could remember, had crafted this whole story about me, the one where I'd washed out of the military, the one where I'd failed. They had no idea. They had no idea about my actual rank, my actual achievements. I'd kept it all a secret, for reasons I was still trying to understand myself. But what happened next, when the base commander himself recognized me, changed everything between us forever. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut, the kind where everyone knows your name, and more importantly, everyone knew our name, the Bennetts. We had this proud military legacy, stretching back generations. My father, an Army colonel, retired after 27 years. My grandfather, a Navy captain, fought in 2 wars. My older brother, Marcus, followed suit, becoming a Marine major. The Bennett name carried weight, serious weight, in military circles. But here's the kicker. That weight was only ever meant to be carried by the men in our household. Gender roles were etched in stone. Men joined up, served, protected. Women? We supported from home, raised the kids, kept the legacy alive through our sons. That was the natural order, according to my father. I can still hear him, booming at family gatherings, Bennett men fight. Bennett women support. That's how we've survived and thrived. But I never fit. From the moment I could remember, I was obsessed with military strategy, with leadership. While other girls played with dolls, I devoured books on historic battles. My dad's study was packed with military history and tactical manuals, and I'd sneak in there whenever he was gone, poring over maps, captivated. When he caught me at 10, instead of encouragement, he just laughed. That's cute, Jessie, but these are serious books for serious men. Why don't you help your mother in the kitchen? It should have crushed me. Instead, it ignited something, a quiet, burning determination that would define my entire life. I stopped sharing my interests with my family, but I never stopped pursuing them. In high school, I crushed JROTC, excelled academically, snagged leadership roles in every club I could. My teachers saw potential. My guidance counselor pushed me to aim high. But at home, my achievements were always sidelined by Marcus's military wins or Stephanie's conventional successes. Then came the first gut punch. My senior year. I'd worked myself to the bone, prepping for West Point. Late nights, extra runs, devouring military history, perfect grades. When the acceptance letter arrived, I was on top of the world, vibrating with a fierce joy. This was it. My chance. That evening at dinner, I spilled the news, expecting, finally, to see pride in my father's eyes. He put down his fork. The look he gave me? It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was pure dismissal. West Point? You? Jessica, you won't last a week in basic training. The military isn't for women like you. It'll chew you up and spit you out. My mother reached for my hand. Honey, why would you want that? You're so smart. You could go anywhere. Why throw away a normal life? Marriage, children. Don't you want that? Marcus, home on leave, actually laughed. Sis, you can barely handle camping in the backyard. What makes you think you can handle military life? The only one silent was Stephanie, 2 years younger, watching us all with unreadable eyes. I'm going, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane raging inside me. I've been accepted and I'm going. My father just shook his head. You'll be back within a month, mark my words. And we'll have to listen to you explain why you failed for the rest of our lives. That night, I celebrated alone in my bedroom. No cake. No congratulations. No family photos. Just me, that acceptance letter, my fierce determination, and the first inkling that my path forward might be a solitary one. I didn't know then that this moment would set the pattern for the next 15 years. Every milestone, every achievement, met with the same dismissal. And slowly, I would stop sharing them altogether. The summer before West Point was brutally tense. My father barely spoke to me, treating my decision like some temporary teenage rebellion. My mother floated between trying to change my mind and sadly packing my things, like sending me off to a tragic fate. Marcus kept up his teasing. Stephanie remained the quiet observer, never picking a side. You know, my father said the night before I left, there's no shame in admitting when something isn't for you. When, not if, you decide to come home, we'll welcome you back. The Bennett name still means something, even if you stumble. I nodded politely. Inside, I made a vow I would never come home defeated. I'd rather not come home at all. The next morning, they drove me to the bus station, not West Point itself, a 4-hour drive they clearly didn't want to make. As the bus pulled away, I watched my family shrink in the rearview mirror. My father's face was already etched with anticipated disappointment. My mother dabbed at tears. Marcus checked his watch. And Stephanie, for just a moment, raised her hand in what might have been a genuine gesture of support. It was the last time I would allow myself to look back for a very, very long time. West Point hit me like a physical blow. All my preparation, all my reading, nothing could have truly readied me for the intensity of those first days. The shouting, the relentless discipline, the physical demands that pushed me to my absolute breaking point. It was everything my father had warned me about and more. That first night, lying in bed after the most grueling day of my life, every muscle screaming, my mind reeling, I wondered, had he been right all along? Had I made a terrible mistake? I wrote letters home in those first weeks, not because I craved their support, but because I desperately needed to prove I was still there, still fighting. The replies were rare brief. My mother's notes were full of local gossip and thinly veiled suggestions that it wasn't too late to reconsider. My father didn't write at all. But amidst the struggle, something unexpected happened. I started to find my rhythm, my strength. More importantly, I found people who saw me, really saw me, for the first time in my life. Diana Lewis became my first true friend at the academy. Unlike my family, she never questioned if I belonged. When I aced an exam or mastered a difficult exercise, her congratulations were genuine. When I struggled, her support was unwavering. "You're going to make one hell of an officer, Bennett," she told me one night as we polished our boots side by side. "I'd follow you into battle any day." It was such a simple statement, but after years of dismissal, it felt revolutionary. Then came the setback that nearly ended everything. During a training exercise in our second year, I suffered a serious leg injury, a bad break, surgery, months of recovery. For weeks, I was confined to the medical facility, watching my classmates continue training without me. Doctors fretted about my recovery timeline. There was talk of medical discharge. No shame in recognizing limitations, they'd say. Words that echoed my father's predictions so closely they haunted my dreams. During this dark period, when I was closest to giving up, Captain Rebecca Mitchell entered my life. A decorated officer, assigned to oversee cadet training, she made an unexpected visit to my hospital room. "I've been watching your progress, Cadet Bennett," she said, sitting beside my bed. "Before your injury, you were on track to graduate in the top 5% of your class." I looked away. "That doesn't matter much now, does it, ma'am?" "It matters entirely," she replied, sharp and clear. "Because it tells me exactly what you're capable of. This injury? It's just data. Another problem to solve. And from what I've seen, solving problems is what you do best." Captain Mitchell visited regularly during my recovery, bringing tactical problems, leadership scenarios. When I could finally begin physical therapy, she arranged for extra sessions. When I doubted my ability to catch up, she pushed harder. "The military doesn't need more soldiers who've never faced adversity," she told me. "It needs leaders who know exactly how to push through it." With her mentorship and my own stubborn determination, I not only recovered but excelled. By graduation, I had indeed achieved that top 5% standing Captain Mitchell had predicted. The day I received my commission, my family attended, out of obligation more than pride. They applauded politely, but there were no enthusiastic cheers, no beaming smiles. At the reception afterward, my father shook my hand formally. Well, he conceded, you proved me wrong about making it through. But the real military is different from school. That's when we'll see. My first assignment filled me with a sense of purpose and excitement I'd never known. For the first time, I had real responsibility, not just training. Actual leadership challenges with real consequences. I thrived on it. The structured environment, the clear chain of command, the emphasis on problem solving, it suited me perfectly. My superior officers noticed. Evaluations praised my innovative thinking, my natural leadership. I earned a reputation for finding solutions to logistical nightmares that others deemed impossible. I felt at home in a way I never had in my actual home. When my promotion to lieutenant came through, I called my parents, hoping this tangible proof of success might finally earn their approval. That's nice, dear, my mother said, but when are you going to transition to something more suitable for starting a family? You're not getting any younger. My father took the phone. Lieutenant is just the beginning, Jessica. Let's see if you make it to captain before celebrating. Most wash out at your level. A week later, Stephanie called to announce she was joining the Air Force, the right way, meaning through officer training school, not a military academy. My father's pride was audible even through the phone line. Now that's a Bennett, he boomed. Stephanie knows how to do things properly. She'll go far, mark my words. That Christmas, the contrast was stark. The entire dinner conversation revolved around Stephanie's upcoming Air Force career. My father offered advice, shared contacts, reminisced about his own service. When I tried to share an achievement from my own work, he cut me off. Jessica's playing at being a soldier in between filing paperwork, he told the extended family with a dismissive wave. Meanwhile, Stephanie is following the real Bennett tradition. Something broke in me that night. After dinner, when my father cornered me to explain again why I would never succeed long-term in military service, I made a decision. You know what, Dad? You're right, I said. My path is different. So different that from now on, I'm not going to bore you with the details. He smiled, interpreting my words as admission of his correctness, rather than the firm boundary they actually were. From that point forward, I stopped sharing my military career with my family. No more updates on promotions. No stories about deployments or responsibilities. If they asked, I gave vague answers, the usual. Same old paperwork. Eventually, they stopped asking altogether. What they didn't know couldn't be diminished. What they couldn't see couldn't be dismissed. My silence became my shield, and behind it, I was free to excel on my own terms. While my family believed I was stagnating in some obscure administrative role, my career was accelerating at an unprecedented rate. My problem-solving abilities and leadership style caught the attention of senior officers who began requesting me for increasingly complex assignments. In 2008, I was selected for a coveted position within Special Operations Command, a role that required top security clearance and placed me at the center of some of the military's most sensitive missions. The selection process was grueling, with a washout rate over 70%. When I received the news, I celebrated alone in my apartment with a single glass of champagne. There was no one to call, no one who would understand what this achievement truly meant. It was during this assignment that I met Ryan, an intelligence officer whose analytical mind matched my own. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared experiences that civilians could never fully grasp. When we eventually married in a small ceremony on base, my family attended out of obligation, looking uncomfortably out of place among my military colleagues. What exactly does your husband do? My mother whispered during the reception. And what do you do now? You've been so secretive. We both work in military intelligence, I answered, truthfully but vaguely. That's all I can really say. My father, of course, interpreted the secrecy as embarrassment, not classification requirements. He cornered Ryan by the bar. Jessica was always stubborn about the military thing, he told my new husband. Never wanted to admit it wasn't for her. Good to see she found someone who understands the system better than she does. Ryan, to his credit, remained polite despite his obvious confusion. Later that night, as we prepared for our honeymoon, he asked the question that had been brewing all evening. Why does your family think you're some kind of military failure? Your father talked to me like I was babysitting you through a career you can't handle. I sighed, finally sharing the full history of my family's dismissal. It's easier this way. They've created a narrative about me, and anything I say to contradict it just creates conflict. So I let them believe what they want. But you're one of the most respected officers in your division. Ryan protested. Your work has literally saved lives. How can they not know who you really are? Because they've never wanted to, I answered simply. As my security clearance level increased, so did the legitimate reasons for my privacy. My rapid promotions continued, fueled by a series of successful operations that earned commendations I couldn't display and recognition I couldn't acknowledge outside classified circles. Meanwhile, my family's narrative about me evolved. No longer was I just failing at a military career. Now I had mental health issues that explained my privacy and reluctance to discuss my work. This new story spread through family gatherings and hometown connections like wildfire. Such a shame about Jessica, I overheard my aunt telling a cousin at a family reunion. Military experiment didn't work out, and now she's too proud to admit it. Mary says she's got anxiety problems now, can't even talk about what she does. My mother did nothing to correct these misperceptions. Instead, she fed them with concerned glances and vague references to supporting Jessica through her challenges, all while continuing her campaign to fix my real problem, my focus on career over family. I met the nicest young man at church, became her standard greeting during our increasingly infrequent phone calls, despite my marriage to Ryan. He's leaving the service to start his own business. Much more stable for raising children. While my family constructed this fictional version of my life, my sister Stephanie continued along her conventional military path. She advanced at a normal rate, earning standard promotions and assignments that my father celebrated as exceptional achievements. Every family gathering featured updates on Stephanie's latest accomplishment, always followed by a concerned glance in my direction and a quick subject change. Stephanie's been selected for the leadership training program, my father announced proudly during a Thanksgiving dinner. Following in my footsteps, just as a Bennett should. He turned to me, lowering his voice to what he probably thought was kindness. Not everyone is cut out for advancement, Jessica. There's no shame in serving in a supporting role. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. I just nodded and smiled, knowing that just the previous month, I had designed the strategic framework for the very program Stephanie was entering. After that holiday, Ryan and I made the difficult decision to limit our family interactions to major events only. The constant dismissal was taking a toll on both of us, creating tension that followed us home like an unwelcome shadow. I hate watching them underestimate you, Ryan confessed. It makes me want to tell them exactly who they're talking down to. I appreciated his protectiveness, but knew that revelations would only create more problems. They wouldn't believe you anyway, I told him. They'd just think you were trying to protect my feelings. Then came the mission that changed everything. A classified operation involving multiple military branches required coordination at the highest levels. The planning was intense, the execution flawless, and the results significant enough to earn private recognition from military leadership that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. In the aftermath, I was approached about a specialized leadership track, one that would place me on an accelerated path to becoming one of the youngest female generals in our branch's history. The selection was based on a combination of field performance, strategic thinking, and leadership potential that had been carefully observed over years. When the promotion came through, the ceremony was small and private due to security considerations. Ryan was there, along with a handful of colleagues with appropriate clearance levels. As the stars were placed on my uniform, I felt a complex mix of pride and sadness. Pride in the achievement. Sadness that the people who had raised me would never know or acknowledge this moment. That night, Ryan and I celebrated at home with takeout and champagne. No family calls, no announcements. Just the quiet recognition between us of how far I had come, despite every prediction of failure. To General Bennett, Ryan toasted, clinking his glass against mine. The secret success story. I smiled, but felt the familiar ache of family estrangement. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been different if I'd fought harder to make them see me. Ryan considered this. Maybe, but at what cost? Would you have made the same decisions, taken the same risks, pursued the same path if you were constantly fighting for their approval? His questions stayed with me long after that night. Had the distance from my family actually enabled my success, rather than detracted from it? Had their dismissal freed me to define achievement on my own terms? I was still pondering these questions when the invitation arrived for Stephanie's promotion ceremony. After rising steadily through Air Force ranks, she was being promoted to major, a significant achievement worth celebrating. Despite our complicated history, she was still my sister. And so, after careful consideration, I decided to attend. What I couldn't have anticipated was how that simple decision would finally bring my two worlds crashing together in the most public way possible. The invitation to Stephanie's promotion ceremony sat on our kitchen counter for 3 days before I made my decision. My initial instinct was to decline politely, send a gift, and avoid another family gathering where I'd be the odd Bennett out. But something, perhaps a lingering hope for reconciliation, made me hesitate. You don't have to go, Ryan said, watching me stare at the invitation for the 100th time. No one would blame you for protecting yourself. She's my sister, I replied simply. Despite everything, that still means something. If you do go, Ryan said carefully, how do you want to handle it? Will you wear your uniform? The question gave me pause. My uniform, with its stars and decorations, would make concealment of my rank impossible. It would force a confrontation I wasn't sure I wanted. Civilian clothes, I decided. This is Stephanie's day. I don't want to create a situation. Ryan nodded, though I could see the disagreement in his eyes. I have meetings I can't reschedule, but I can try to join you later if you want support. I'll be fine, I assured him, with more confidence than I felt. It's just a few hours. The morning of the ceremony, I chose my outfit carefully. A conservative blue dress that wouldn't draw attention, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back neatly. Professional, but unmistakably civilian. As I drove to the Air Force Base, I rehearsed responses to the inevitable questions and comments, bracing myself for the subtle digs and dismissals that had become family tradition. I arrived early, hoping to slip into the ceremony hall without much interaction. But my mother spotted me in the parking lot. Jessica. Over here, she waved enthusiastically as though we were the closest of families. My father and brother stood beside her, both in civilian clothes, but wearing their military pride like an invisible uniform. You made it, my father said, his tone suggesting he'd expected otherwise. Good to see you making an effort for your sister's big day. I wouldn't miss it, I replied evenly. As we walked toward the ceremony hall, my mother linked her arm through mine, a gesture that felt more restraining than affectionate. You look nice, dear. A bit thin, perhaps? Are you eating properly? And your hair. You always had such pretty hair when you wore it down. Before I could respond, we were approached by a group of officers in Air Force uniforms. My father straightened perceptibly, shifting into his colonel persona with practiced ease. Colonel Bennett, one of the officers, greeted him warmly. It's an honor to meet you. Your daughter Stephanie speaks highly of your service. The honor's mine, my father replied, shaking hands firmly. The Bennett military tradition continues strongly with Stephanie. He placed a hand on my shoulder. And this is our other daughter, Jessica. She tried the military route for a while too, but it wasn't a good fit. The officers nodded politely in my direction, their interest visibly diminishing upon learning I was the civilian sister who couldn't hack it. Jessica has a desk job with the government now, my mother added in a stage whisper. We don't ask too many questions. She gets anxious talking about work. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but maintained my composed expression. This was nothing new. Just another variation of the same dismissal I'd experienced for years. As we entered the ceremony hall, more introductions followed, each featuring some version of my failure narrative. Marcus joined in, adding colorful embellishments about how he'd always known Jessica was too sensitive for military life. Remember when she cried during that war movie? He reminisced to a group of his Marine friends. should have been our first clue that playing soldier wasn't going to work out for her. Throughout these exchanges, Stephanie remained uncomfortably silent. When our eyes met across the room, she offered a small smile that seemed apologetic, but made no move to correct the family narrative. Her silence felt like complicity. By the time we were seated, my jaw ached from maintaining a pleasant expression while being systematically diminished. The weight of years of dismissal pressed down on me, heavier than it had felt in a long time. I found myself contemplating a discreet exit. A sudden work emergency. Anything to spare me the next 2 hours of this treatment. As I considered my escape options, memories flooded back unbidden. My father's prediction that I'd wash out of basic training. My mother's constant suggestions of more suitable careers. Marcus's mockery. Stephanie's silence. Year after year of achievements unacknowledged. Promotions uncelebrated. Contributions dismissed. I thought about the classified operations I directed. The lives saved through strategies I developed. The junior officers who looked to me for leadership and guidance. None of it existed in this room, where I was still just Jessica who couldn't cut it. Jessica who needed protection from her own failure. Jessica who had disappointed the family legacy. My hand moved toward my purse, ready to check my phone and fabricate that convenient emergency. Then I stopped. A new thought surfaced through the hurt. Running now would only reinforce their narrative. Staying. Enduring this with dignity was its own form of strength, one they would never recognize, but that I would know. I straightened in my seat as the ceremony began, focusing on the reason I had come, to support my sister. Whatever our complicated history, whatever her failure to defend me, she deserved this recognition of her hard work. I could give her that much, even if my family had never done the same for me. The ceremony hall filled with uniformed personnel and family members. The formal proceedings began with the posting of colors and the national anthem. I stood respectfully, my military bearing impossible to fully suppress despite my civilian clothes. As I prepared to endure the next hour of ceremonial proceedings, I had no idea that the carefully constructed boundaries between my two lives were about to collapse completely. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. Formal speeches about duty and service, recognition of distinguished guests, acknowledgement of family sacrifices. I maintained my composed expression through it all, focusing on breathing evenly and not making eye contact with family members. Then came the announcement that Colonel James Harrison, base commander, would preside over the promotions. My heart stuttered for a moment. Harrison. I knew that name. We had worked together on a joint operation just months earlier, a classified mission that had required coordination between our branches. He had reported directly to me during that operation. As Colonel Harrison strode to the podium, I subtly angled my body away and lowered my head slightly. Perhaps he wouldn't notice me in civilian clothes among the crowd. Perhaps military courtesy would prevent him from acknowledging me even if he did. His speech began standardly enough, recognizing the achievements of those being promoted and the significance of their advancement. I started to relax, believing I might avoid detection after all. Military service is a proud tradition, Colonel Harrison continued, scanning the audience as he spoke, one that extends beyond the individual, to embrace entire families who support. His gaze reached my section and stopped abruptly. Even from a distance, I could see the momentary confusion in his expression, followed by recognition and surprise. A barely perceptible break in his speech followed before he recovered and continued. I kept my expression neutral, hoping against hope that he would maintain protocol and continue without acknowledging me. The rest of his speech passed in a blur as I contemplated the increasingly likely scenario that my carefully separated worlds were about to collide. After the formal promotion ceremonies concluded, Stephanie stood proudly in her new rank insignia, receiving congratulations from colleagues and superiors. My family clustered around her, basking in reflected glory. I stood slightly apart, offering a supportive smile when our eyes met, but maintaining a respectful distance from the military formalities. I was contemplating a subtle exit when I saw Colonel Harrison making his way through the crowd, directly toward me. His purposeful stride and direct gaze left no doubt about his destination. I straightened instinctively, military bearing taking over despite my civilian dress. He stopped directly in front of me, his expression still registering surprise beneath his professional demeanor. Then, in a voice just loud enough to be heard by those nearby, including my entire family, he addressed me with unmistakable respect. "Ma'am," he said, a genuine question in his tone. "You're the general. General Bennett." The conversations around us stopped abruptly. My father, who had been mid-story about Stephanie's childhood determination, turned slowly. "I apologize for the informal setting, General," Colonel Harrison continued, either unaware of or undeterred by the sudden tension. "I didn't expect to see you here today. Your work on Operation Northern Compass was exceptional. We're still implementing your strategic framework across multiple bases." A heavy silence fell over our section of the room. I could feel my family's confusion and disbelief radiating like physical heat. "Thank you, Colonel Harrison," I replied evenly. "It was a team effort. And today is Major Bennett's day, my sister. I'm here as family, not in an official capacity." His eyes widened slightly at the connection. "Your sister? I had no idea. That's remarkable. 2 Bennett women serving with such distinction. Your family must be incredibly proud." Before I could formulate a diplomatic response, my father stepped forward, his expression a complex mixture of confusion and disbelief. "There must be some mistake," he said stiffly. "My daughter Jessica works in an administrative position." "She's not no mistake, sir," Colonel Harrison interrupted, respectfully but firmly. "General Bennett is one of our most decorated strategic leaders. Her work is largely classified, but her reputation within military leadership is frankly legendary." Other military personnel had begun to gather, drawn by the unusual interaction. An Air Force major approached, recognition dawning on his face. "General Bennett? The Jessica Bennett who developed the integrated response protocol? It's an honor, ma'am. We just completed training on your methodologies last month." Another officer joined the growing circle. "General, your keynote at the Joint Chiefs Strategic Summit was transformative for our approach to multi-branch operations." As more military personnel approached with similar comments of respect and recognition, my family remained frozen in place. My father's face had drained of color. My mother's hand was pressed against her mouth. Marcus stared with undisguised shock. And Stephanie, her expression was the most complex of all, a mixture of surprise, confusion, and something that looked almost like betrayal. Colonel Harrison, now aware of the awkward situation, attempted to provide a graceful exit. "I apologize for interrupting your family celebration, General. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week to discuss the expansion of the training program." "Of course, Colonel. My office will contact yours." With a respectful nod, he withdrew, taking most of the other officers with him. In their wake, the silence among my family was deafening. My father was the first to speak, his voice barely controlled. "What exactly is going on here, Jessica?" I met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Yes," my mother agreed quickly, her social instincts kicking in despite her obvious shock. "Let's find somewhere quiet." We moved as a unit to an empty conference room adjacent to the ceremony hall. As the door closed behind us, the questions erupted. "General," my father's voice was incredulous. "What kind of game are you playing? When did this happen? Why would you keep something like this a secret?" my mother demanded. "There's no way," Marcus shook his head. "There's absolutely no way you outrank all of us. This has to be some kind of mistake." Stephanie remained silent, watching me with an unreadable expression. For a moment, I considered continuing my years-long practice of deflection and minimization. Then I looked at their faces, confused, angry, hurt, and realized the time for hiding had passed. Whatever the consequences, truth was the only path forward. "It's not a mistake," I said quietly, but firmly. "I am a general. Have been for over a year now. Before that, I held progressively higher ranks that I never discussed because it became clear, very early in my career, that my achievements would never be recognized as valid by this family." The bluntness of my statement seemed to stun them momentarily. "But how?" my mother finally asked. "How could we not know?" "Because you didn't want to know," I replied simply. Because it was easier to believe I had failed than to reconsider your assumptions about who I could become. My father recovered his composure first, anger replacing his initial shock. He closed the distance between us, his voice lowered but intense. So this whole time you've been, what? Laughing at us? Playing some kind of elaborate game? Letting us believe you were struggling while you were actually succeeding. I finished for him. No, Dad, I wasn't laughing. I was protecting myself from exactly this reaction. The disbelief. The questioning. The immediate assumption that something must be wrong about my achievement rather than your perception. My mother moved to stand beside him, her expression hurt rather than angry. But we are your family, Jessica. How could you keep something this important from us for years? All those holidays, all those conversations, were you just pretending the entire time? The genuine pain in her voice made me soften slightly. I wasn't pretending, Mom. I was compartmentalizing. After years of having every military achievement dismissed or diminished, I made a decision to stop sharing that part of my life. But General? Marcus interjected, still struggling with the concept. That's not just any achievement, that's... He paused, military hierarchy clearly conflicting with his image of his sister. That's significant. That's historic. Yes, I acknowledged. It is. I'm one of the youngest women to achieve this rank in our branch's history. My work has primarily been in strategic operations and intelligence, most of it classified. The accelerated promotion track I was placed on is reserved for exceptional circumstances. And you never thought to mention this, my father demanded, his voice rising again. Not once in all these years? When exactly should I have mentioned it, Dad? I countered, years of suppressed frustration finally surfacing. When you told the Sullivan family at Christmas that I just couldn't cut it in real military service. Or when you explained to Grandpa that I had found my level in a desk job. Or maybe when you introduced me to your old military buddies as our daughter who tried the army but wasn't Bennett material. Each example landed like a physical blow. My father took an involuntary step back. I never said you did, Stephanie interrupted quietly, speaking for the first time. We all did. Or we stood by while it was said. All eyes turned to her, standing in her new major's uniform, finally breaking her characteristic silence. We created a story about Jessica, she continued, and we never questioned it, even when the evidence didn't fit. Even when she stopped talking about her work entirely, which should have been a massive red flag. We just incorporated that into our narrative too. Her acknowledgement of the family dynamic struck me deeply. After years of her silence, hearing Stephanie articulate the truth so clearly was unexpectedly moving. My mother sank into a nearby chair, her social composure crumbling as the full reality set in. All this time, we've been telling everyone you couldn't handle military life. We've been pitying you. Oh God, Jessica, what have we done? My father remained standing, his military bearing intact even as his worldview visibly realigned. You should have told us, he insisted, though with less conviction. Regardless of our misconceptions, you should have set the record straight. I tried. In the beginning, I replied. After my first promotion. After my special operations selection. After several commendations. Each time, the achievement was questioned, diminished, or attributed to affirmative action or connections rather than merit. Eventually, I stopped trying. Marcus, ever the tactician, shifted to practical questions. But how did you manage to keep this hidden? Promotions are public record. There are ceremonies, announcements. Most of my work has been classified, I explained. The security clearance required limits what can be shared publicly. My promotion ceremony was small and private. As for public records, did any of you ever actually look me up? Check my military status? Ask directly about my rank rather than assuming. Their silence answered for them. The confrontation might have continued, but a knock at the door interrupted us. Ryan entered, his expression a mixture of concern and relief at finding me. Sorry I'm late, he said, crossing to stand beside me, his hand resting supportively at the small of my back. Meeting ran longer than expected. Did I miss anything important? The question, so innocent in its timing, struck us all as absurdly funny given the circumstances. Stephanie actually laughed, a short, surprised sound quickly stifled. You could say that. I replied, the tension momentarily broken. My family just learned I'm not a military failure after all. Ryan assessed the room quickly, reading the situation. The truth finally comes out. He extended his hand to my father. General Bennett is one of the most respected strategic minds in the service, sir. Those of us who work with her consider it an honor. My father took his hand automatically, military courtesy overriding his emotional turmoil. Before he could respond, another knock came, and Colonel Harrison appeared in the doorway. "Excuse the interruption," he said formally. "General Bennett, I apologize, but there's an urgent matter requiring your attention." The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more awkward. Here was undeniable proof of my position, delivered just as my family was processing the revelation. "Of course, Colonel. I'll be right there." I turned back to my family. "I have to take this, but this conversation isn't over." "No," my father agreed, looking at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "It certainly isn't." As I moved to follow Colonel Harrison, Ryan remained behind, quietly saying, "I'll wait here and answer any questions I can." The urgent matter turned out to be relatively minor, a question about training protocol implementation that could have waited, but served as a convenient excuse to give me a moment of space. After resolving it quickly, I paused in the empty hallway, gathering my thoughts before returning to the family confrontation. Through the partially open door, I could hear Ryan's voice as he spoke to my family. "She never wanted to embarrass any of you," he was saying. "That's why she didn't correct the record publicly. But you should know that while you were telling everyone she failed, she was receiving commendations for operations that saved American lives." My father's response was too quiet to hear, but Ryan's wasn't. "With all due respect, sir, what you can't believe doesn't change the reality. Your daughter is exceptional at what she does. Anyone who's served with her knows it. The only people who don't are sitting in this room." I took a deep breath and re-entered the conference room. The atmosphere had shifted subtly, still tense, but with the first hint of possible reconciliation. My father turned to me, his military bearing still intact, but his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I think we need to start this conversation over," he said quietly. "There's clearly a lot I don't know about my daughter." 1 week after Stephanie's promotion ceremony, we gathered at my parents' house for dinner. The first family meal in years that wasn't tied to a holiday or obligatory celebration. The invitation had come from my father, formally extended via phone rather than through my mother as usual. That small detail itself signaled a shift in family dynamics. The atmosphere as we arrived was tentative, charged with unspoken questions and the weight of years of misunderstanding. My mother greeted us at the door, her usual social polish tempered by a new uncertainty. "Jessica." "Ryan." "Thank you for coming," she said, embracing me with uncharacteristic gentleness. "Please come in." My father waited in the living room, standing as we entered, a military courtesy I recognized but had never before received from him in this house. Marcus and Stephanie were already seated, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and caution. Dinner began awkwardly, with careful small talk about the weather and local news. No one seemed ready to address the elephant in the room until my father finally set down his fork and looked directly at me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual authoritative tone. "And I owe you an apology, Jessica." Several apologies, actually. The statement was so unexpected that I found myself momentarily speechless. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on outdated thinking," he continued. "I dismissed your achievements without ever really seeing them. And I created a narrative about your military service that was completely false." He struggled visibly with the next words. "It's not easy to admit I was wrong, especially not about something so fundamental. But I was wrong about you, Jessica. Completely wrong." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "We all were, dear. When Colonel Harrison called you General, I thought it must be some kind of mistake. But then Ryan explained, about your work, your rank, everything you've accomplished. I just kept thinking, how could we not have known? Because I stopped telling you," I acknowledged softly. "After years of having every achievement dismissed, I just stopped sharing that part of my life." "That's on us," Marcus said, surprising me with his directness. We created an environment where you couldn't share your successes. That's not what family should do. Stephanie, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. I knew something wasn't adding up. The way you carried yourself, your understanding of military matters, certain comments you made. But I never pushed past the family narrative. She met my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Jess. I should have been a better sister. The apologies were meaningful, but I knew that real healing would require more than words. I appreciate what you're all saying, I said carefully. But this isn't going to be fixed in one dinner. There are years of patterns to address. You're right, my father agreed, surprising me again. This is just a beginning. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to get to know my daughter, who she really is, not who I assumed she would be. I'd like that, I admitted. But it has to be different this time. I need to know that my achievements won't be dismissed or explained away. That you'll actually hear me when I speak. What can we do to prove that? My mother asked sincerely. For starters, I said, you can ask questions. Real questions about my work, what I can share of it, without immediately filtering it through your preconceptions. You can acknowledge that my path, while different from what you expected, has value. My father nodded slowly. That seems entirely reasonable. The conversation gradually shifted, becoming more natural as my family began asking genuine questions about my career. I shared what I could about my work, my leadership philosophy, the challenges of my position. For the first time, I felt them listening, really listening, to who I was rather than who they'd expected me to be. As the evening progressed, I realized that while the hurt hadn't disappeared, something new was emerging in its place, the possibility of an authentic relationship based on who we actually were rather than family mythology. The healing process continued over the following months, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes painfully, but steadily. My mother stopped suggesting alternative careers and began asking thoughtful questions about my current one. Marcus, after initial difficulty adjusting to our reversed hierarchy, found a new respect that gradually evolved into genuine brotherly pride. Stephanie and I developed a closer relationship as fellow military women, sharing experiences and perspectives we'd never before discussed. My father's journey was perhaps the most profound. His lifelong beliefs about gender roles and military service were fundamentally challenged by my success. It wasn't an easy transition for him, but I watched him wrestle with his preconceptions, gradually replacing them with a new understanding. 6 months after Stephanie's promotion ceremony, I received formal recognition for a strategic initiative that had transformed interbranch operations. The ceremony would be public, one of the rare occasions when my work could be openly acknowledged. After some consideration, I sent invitations to my family. I didn't expect them to attend. The venue was several states away, the timing inconvenient. I sent the invitations more as a gesture of inclusion than with any real expectation. So, when I stepped onto the stage and saw them in the audience, all of them, dressed formally and sitting attentively, I momentarily lost my composure. My father sat straight-backed in his seat, his expression solemn, but his eyes unmistakably proud. My mother dabbed at tears beside him. Marcus and Stephanie, in uniform, stood at respectful attention. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photographs, my father approached. For a moment, he simply looked at me, in my full dress uniform, stars on my shoulders, medals across my chest. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. I've been wrong about a lot of things. But I'm learning. He extended his hand formally. Congratulations, General Bennett. Your service honors our family. The words I'd once longed to hear now brought a complex mix of emotions. Validation, certainly. But also the recognition that I'd long since stopped needing his approval to know my worth. Thank you, Dad, I replied, shaking his hand. Then, setting protocol aside, I hugged him briefly. That means something. But you should know, I would have done this even if you never recognized it. I had to learn to define success on my own terms. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. And that, I suspect, is what makes you a good leader. In the months and years that followed, our family relationships continued to evolve. The old patterns occasionally resurfaced during moments of stress or conflict, but we now had the awareness and tools to recognize and address them. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic in a way our previous interactions had never been. The most profound realization for me was that the journey had never really been about proving my family wrong. It had been about finding the freedom to be fully myself, to pursue excellence without the constant need for external validation. My family's recognition, when it finally came, was meaningful, but not defining. The true victory had been in the quiet moments along the way, when I'd chosen to believe in myself despite every voice suggesting I should doubt. So, what's the question I leave you with today? When faced with others' limited expectations of you, will you fight to change their minds, or will you focus that energy on exceeding your own expectations instead? Sometimes, the most powerful path isn't convincing others of your worth, but building a life so true to yourself that their opinions become irrelevant. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments about times you've had to believe in yourself when others didn't. Remember that the most important recognition will always be the kind you give yourself.